Welcome, Jon Taylor. It's so great to see you again
Thanks,
today.
Sammy. Yeah, good to see you.
So, what do you have for us today?
We're going to kick off a series. I don't know how long it's going to be, how many parts we're going to have to this, but the last couple of webinars that I've done, I've focused more on the personal responsibility and relationships than I have, and it's got me thinking and wanting to learn. I want to explore what maturity means, um,
Good topic.
and I think we'll do that long term through a bunch of different developmental models like Erickson, Kohlberg, etc. But today we'll keep it pretty simple. Um, but maturity is, I think it relates to our ability to accept our personal responsibility in relationships. And I don't care if you are the person who's done betraying or the person who's done betrayed, or neither of those things have happened in your world. Um, I think we all get a little behind developmentally. Some things come together for us a little more easily, a little more naturally. Some of us come from environments where it is a little easier to learn um, the role of rules and responsibilities. Some of us come from environments where it's a little easier to learn self-regulation, independence, and autonomy. And some of us come from a relation or environments where it's a little easier to keep the pace developmentally with social relationships and empathy. But nobody gets to adulthood, and certainly not in their intimate relationships, being the total package of maturity. Um, Everybody who's listening today, regardless of whether you are in the addiction or betrayal continuum, I want you to listen for um, these milestones I'm going to talk about, and do a compassionate self check. How do I measure up? Am I on track developmentally and maturity wise, or do I struggle in this area? And again, there's no shame in it. That's the thing I love about human development is if you didn't get the expected development in the window where you normally would, you can still get it. It might take a little longer. You might have to work a little harder than if you hit it in that window. But our brains are plastic, meaning they can change, they can learn throughout a lifetime, and that ability for that change and that learning to happen starts with humility. I would say it starts with a recognition that I don't have it all, and that's okay. I don't have to be perfect to be okay. Just a note, as I talk about personal responsibility over the next few webinars and have before, this of course is not something we throw around at each other. This is not a weaponized term or a concept in relationships. If you find yourself using it that way, you are not an adherent to personal responsibility, because personal responsibility is recognizing what we ourselves can and cannot do, should and should not do, and we hold ourselves to that, no matter the pain or discomfort or disappointment that comes along with that. So, um, as we look at maturity over the next few webinars, I want to get a really a functional sense of what it means to be mature. And like I said, there's really interesting developmental models out there. And what a developmental model is it's an idea that describes how individuals and organizations or relationships progress through progress through increasingly complex situations, relationships, because that's the fundamental nature of an organism or a relationship. The longer it exists, the greater the age, the more complexity there is to it. Now, age and maturity are not the same thing. You can have days tick by on the calendar with little to no change inside of you. You can have people, and this is actually how development happens. We're greeted by challenges that we have to rise to in order to survive. So you can have someone who has not had as many days on the calendar pass, who possesses a maturity beyond their years, because they've had to face struggle. They've had to figure things out. So in that way, our sense of development, or our development, or our maturity, is like a muscle in the body. The more that we are challenged by complexity, the greater our ability to handle it. The greater our ability to grow, or the greater chance there is that we grow under that. So complexity, like I said, is an unavoidable destination for organisms and relationships. Most of the time, active trauma or chronic trauma, now think in terms of the resources it takes to just get out of bed in the morning when you're facing something horrific, or when you're afraid. More of the time than not, think of the resources it takes to just function, the neurological resources it takes to function. So with that big drain on neurological resources, generally, when there is active trauma or chronic trauma, we resist complexity. Think about when you're at the end of a long, tired day and the room you're in is just too loud, too much for me to track, overstimulated. That happens on a big scale too. So one sign that there is trauma to be resolved, or issues from the past to be resolved, is when someone, and I use the word resists because there's a natural flow to things maturing and getting more complex, less black and white. When it's a sign there's something to resolve, when a person cannot or will not wrap their mind around the complexity of a relationship or human nature. So again, I hope that's not a statement that brings shame. It's not meant to. Again, that's a self-check. What are some of the complexities I struggle with in my work? For example, in my work with enmeshed men, I have yet to hear an enmeshed man story where I think that guy had mature parents, because some of the complexity that is resisted is when a child grows up and places more importance on a peer group than on the family of origin, or at least puts more resources towards a peer group than the family of origin. A mature parent can recognize that as natural, if not painful. They can recognize that as potentially good for the child, if not nail biting for now, because this kid still doesn't know how to make the best of choices on their own. So the mature parent can allow that even when they feel anxious. There's complexity. This is good for you, and it's like so scary for me. The immature parent will keep the child in the nest. They'll resist the complexity. How could you love anyone more than mom, or how could you love anyone more than dad? The mature parent can recognize there's more than enough love to go around, and it's a different kind of love, with a romantic partner and a friend group and a family. So the love that we share, the love you can have for me, is not threatened by your other relationships. So that kind of resistance of complexity is, I think it's ubiquitous. Everybody has at least one version of that they do. And like I said, it's a sign of things to be resolved. And I would say the more stringent the insistence, no, you must love your mom or dad more than anybody else. The rigidity around that, I think, speaks to the level of fear and shame and inadequacy that's under that. So today we're going to take a general look at social development. This isn't from any particular developmental model. This actually comes from the National Institutes of Health website, which I was interested to see as I was Googling around this week, putting this together. There's whole sections on the NIH website about like teenage development and what people go through socially, emotionally, biologically. It was way more of a robust resource than I thought it would be. So we're going to look at these expected functions at certain ages, and know that these ages, like in childhood, these ages are not exact. So for example, our pediatrician was expecting our little girl to walk anywhere from 9 months to 12 months of age. She didn't take her first steps till she was 15 months old. We weren't concerned at all with her development. Everything else is on track. To say she was a bigger baby was an understatement. And our pediatrician would also say larger kids move slower. It takes them longer. Um, and so these age ranges I'm going to give, this is about when we see it show up. But certainly with the things we're going to talk about now, if you are into adulthood, early adulthood onward, and you struggle with these, that is not it's going to come. You're going to have to work on it. So again, I am encouraging everybody here, give yourself a compassionate self-check as I describe these different aspects of emotional and social development through a lifespan. And we'll go through kind of quick. Like I said, there's a ton of information out there on this. If this piques your interest, do some Googling around yourself. And in future webinars, I'll come back with specific developmental theories that we'll take a look at. So 1 to 2 months of age, this is where we see infants generally start to be able to respond intentionally to a parent. Usually it's the coos, it's the high-pitched noises, and gentle touch. So you'll see a responsiveness to it. You may even start to see some smiling at this age. And you can see the underpinnings here of social relationships. Positive responsiveness, warm responsiveness is, if you want to call it a social skill, it's like a baseline social skill. And that starts at 1 to 2 months of age. 2 to 3 months of age, this is where infants start to learn how to regulate physiologically. That's mind-blowing. 2 to 3 months of age, this is essentially still a lump, a bag of skin and bones, of course with a brain and all that. But it's amazing at 2 to 3 months of age when and that ability to soothe and regulate comes from the responsiveness of a caregiver. So when the caregiver is responsive to the child's needs and helps the child soothe and regulate, the child starts to take that kind of stuff on board as well. And there's different as people age and through childhood, there's different levels of self-regulation, but this is where we start to see it. So this might be an infant who prefers a pacifier when they're upset, or they might have a blanket, or likes to sleep in a particular place, or even has people that they prefer to be held by. At 4 to 5 months of age, this is where you'll start to see infants they call it sensitive to cooperative interaction. That means an infant will notice when you're working in tandem with them. And one of the big ways that this manifests is the collaborative relationship between caregiver and infant to manage tension. So caregiver reads the signs of distress on the infant's face and starts checking to see what's wrong. Are you hungry? Are you tired? Do you need a change? Do you need a reposition? And the infant is collaborative and cooperative in responding, showing relief. You're not going to get a yes or a no out of a baby's mouth at this age, but you will see relief when needs are being met. 6 to 12 months of age, this is when you'll really start to see a preference, an attachment relationship. So for my spouse and I, this was always, it was either you won the lottery or you found out you did not. As our kids got to these ages, you could definitely see which parent they preferred at that time. And that can change throughout time as well. At our house right now, it changes over the course of the day. I'm the preferred parent in the morning, and at night, you would think that I had a sock full of nickels get my kids to bed, the toddlers, which is not the case. I'm nice. I do a good bedtime routine, but they prefer their mom at night. So you'll also get at 6 to 12 months, infants will distinguish between the familiar and the unfamiliar. And that which is familiar, if it is safe, you'll start to see the infant relaxing in the presence of the familiar and tensing up in the presence of the unfamiliar. Stan Tatkin, who I study with, and he's been on Dr. Rob's podcast, he really takes a lot from, they call it the strange situation experiment, an attachment experiment with children. He really takes a lot from that in understanding attachment styles. And so you'll see in that they put infants around this age, I think it's 12 to 18 months, in a situation that is somewhat strange, and they look for instances of clinginess, familiarity, the ability to self-regulate. And what they notice in infants who later on manifest with what we call disorganized attachment is whether the parent is in the room or not, the infant is not any more or less phased. So you can see even at this early stage, if there's disruptions to attachment, you'll have someone respond in unfamiliar, overwhelming situations in a way that we wouldn't expect. That's another way of looking at maturity, and we'll see if my theory holds out as we go through, the next few weeks with this. But one of my theories about adult maturity is when you're looking at someone with the body of a 35-year-old in all sorts of situations and all sorts of stress, they behave like we would expect a 35-year-old to behave, physiologically, emotionally, socially. You'll also see at 6 to 12 months, this is where a child will seek a caregiver for comfort, help, and play. So you'll start to see some relationship seeking here. Again, that preferred person. 12 to 18 months, this is where we generally see infants learning to explore their environment with support from a caregiver. So again, that's a sign of some secure attachment, is not that the kid is overly precocious and will go explore anything, but they'll check to make sure that the caregiver is close by, paying attention. And once that condition is met, you'll see a kid's inhibitions come down and a willingness to explore. Around 12 months or so, you can see a kid engage in interactive play, patty cake, peekaboo. So again, very early on, the ability and the comfort with social interactions with another person. And you can see here how this is all dependent on the relationship with the caregiver. There are some departures from this that we'll see in kids who are maybe not neurotypical, but that's also expected development for a kid who is not neurotypical. So like gaze aversion, or doing more solitary, not interactive interaction. That's normal, for example, with a kid with like autism or ADHD. So even in those kind of conditions, there is a normal developmental track that may differ from a neurotypical developmental track, but is not pathological. It's not a sign that there is trouble other than the difference in wiring of the brain. At 18 to 30 months, we start to see individuation and autonomy. So this is a year and a half to almost 3 years old. This is where, with help from a parent, again, encouragement, mostly, you'll start to see a kid face challenges in their environment more persistently and enthusiastically. This morning we went to go run errands, and my my 2-year-old spent about 5 minutes trying to get the top part of his car seat buckle all lined up, and I was not allowed to even comment on it until he had reached a point where he was frustrated and tired enough where he asked for help. So again, it's those of you who spend time around kids this age, sometimes you want to pull out your hair if you have it, because of that persistence. But that is a really important developmental stage. Again, the outcome of that developmental stage is environmental challenges are greeted with persistence and enthusiasm. Think about, and I know this might be quite a stretch for some of you, but think about how you have tackled your own individual recovery. Is there persistence and enthusiasm, or is it a demoralizing chore? And again, I get the nature of this. Nobody plans on this or asks for it. But when I look at especially individuals in addiction recovery who make it and have robust recoveries, they are not optimistically out of touch with the seriousness of the task, but they do tend to have some of that, like, the more I learn, the more I can do, the more resources I have, the more I can make of this, which is a really, I think it's a really important piece of developmental maturity to take into relationships. From 30 to 54 months, so this is about 2.5 to 4.5, This is where we start to see impulse control. For a lot of kids, gender roles are very defined, and you'll see peer relationship issues emerge. During this time, you'll start to see preschoolers really exhibit and learn flexible self-control. Initiative increases, and initiative helps decrease anxiety from guilt or loss of control. So this is where kids really lock in and get a sense of whether what I do makes a difference, whether what I do helps me to feel better. So you can see, and this is what I think is entertaining about this age, you can see some really funny ways of coping, like weird ways of coping. But again, it's this preschool toddler brain putting together how the world works and finding a way for themselves. So last night, my 3-year-old didn't want to go to bed. She was scared, and she just knew that she would be comfortable cuddling this like large, hard plastic toy suitcase thing. So sure enough, she fell asleep curled around that thing, and I, gently moved it because I knew that wouldn't stay comfortable all night. But again, here's her ingenuity, the creativity, the flexibility. I need to decrease my anxiety around bedtime. So there's my object for the night. I must have it. Solving her own problems. Turn taking and joint goals are also, we see, emerge around 2.5 to 4.5 years of age. Between ages 5 and 6, developmentally on track, socially developmentally on track, we'll see kids be able to follow simple rules and directions. They also learn some adult social skills here. They start to learn. And I thought it was really interesting, the ones that this article highlighted, which was giving praise and apologizing for unintentional mistakes. So take that into your maturity self-assessment. Can you apologize for unintentional mistakes? And again, look at the complexity of that. I know so many adults, like 10 times this age, who struggle with that. It's a complex thing. Being able to fall on your sword for something you didn't mean to do, but can still take responsibility for. Ages 7 and 8, we see that a child can fully understand rules and regulations. They can understand why those might be in place, situations they might be applicable in. They can understand responsibilities. And developmentally, around 7 or 8, you can see kids being able to start to take charge of some simple chores and simple responsibilities. 9 to 10 years old, this is where you really see the rise of the peer group. So 9 to 10 is when kids will really emerge as like, I have a best friend. They will develop positive, nurturing relationships with other people. And I thought this was interesting too. I'm thinking about my oldest. It was probably around 10 where he definitely had a friend group, and man, was it full of drama. And so I'm reading what this article says here about, you get, if you have a reasonable attachment base, you can have a balance between independence and self-confidence. You can also have complex social relationships that include disagreements, breakups, new friendships, and long-lasting relations. So towards the end of his elementary school career, I wanted to lock the kid up and not let him spend any time with friends. It was such a headache. He and his group of friends now, it's the same group of friends, they went through the ringer and they had breakups and disagreements, and they learned how to work through them. It's really cool to see them now. And again, that happens, the ability for that to happen starts around those ages. So this is where you can see the frenemy relationships really start. That's not a sign that you've got a high drama kid. That's a sign that this kid is starting to navigate, starting to make decisions for themselves in relationships, and seeing the long-term value of people who have been in their life for a long time, who have a shared history. Maybe there's something worth here, swallowing our pride over accepting our differences, and figuring out what will work between the two of us. So that's it for today on development, just general development. And again, the takeaway here, as I would say, reflect on your own abilities in your relationships, your own abilities within yourself. If you find yourself behind in any of these, again, give yourself a lot of self-compassion, but also um, get serious about what you want to do to challenge yourself so you can grow in these ways. Like I said, we may have developmental windows where the stuff that we learn, the way we develop, comes a bit more naturally. But you can learn this stuff, you can develop later in life, even if it is a little harder or a little less convenient. It's just as rewarding whether you get these skills at 30, 40, or 50 versus 3, 4, or 5.
So I have a question for you from the first part of it, because you were talking about parents and like mother enmeshment, and the more stringent, the more resistance there is. Um, so that feels like a really big sticking point where like the entire system is going to be against you taking responsibility and doing any individualization. So thoughts on that? um because it's like great if I want to accept responsibility and things like that, but like when there's all of this, no, you need, no, your primary relationship needs to be
Yeah.
with me, like that feels tough.
Yeah, it is, and I think the most helpful way that I've heard that distilled down, and Ken Adams will talk a lot about this. There's a resistance to grief, and grief and
Mm,
happiness together, I think, is some of the most complex emotional thing. I've heard it called before in recovery circles, joy pain,
mm,
which I think
mm,
is so
joy.
much of what our family relationships are about, especially kids growing up. So I've told this story before here. I tell it in enmeshment workshops. This is probably 4 or 5 years ago. My wife had given our boys haircuts, and we went somewhere. It was closer than that because we had our little girl. So it's 3.5 years ago. She's giving them haircuts. We're going somewhere as a family. My wife looks back at the back seat and she says something she said to our oldest, a million times at that point. She says, "You are so handsome." And I want girls my own age to tell me that. I don't want to hear that from my own mom. And, we, in that moment, we stepped up to the plate and said, "All right, good for you. You're not going to hear that anymore. You don't have to be mama's little boy, mama's handsome prince anymore." And then we talked to each other later that night and we cried together about how our
Mm.
little boy was growing up. So, I think in families, there is a lot of room for joy, pain. And one sign I would say of immaturity is the resistance to grief. We all resist it to some degree, but the absolute denial of the necessity to grieve. Our kid is growing up by no fault of our own, no fault of his own. This is just what happens.
Well, and it should happen. I was cracking up with the child seat, in the 5 minutes, and going like, oh yeah, I remember when you had to plan extra time. But unfortunately, like I immediately thought of the people that I know and that will be going, no, here, let me do this,
Mm-hmm.
and I see the result. I've like there's a 20-year-old child who does not perceive, that they can do because parent has always stepped in, and the reinforcing message is, no, I
Yeah.
can do it better than you. And so the struggle of like, okay, I need to plan extra time just to get the car seat, get the kids in the car seat, extra time because they're gonna, do this on their own, and not everybody's willing to do that. Fascinating too when you're talking about the 2 to 3 month old learn to self-regulate, physiologically. I mean, yeah, like I have experience with children. I would have never known that, So this is, it's just really interesting stuff. So,
Yeah.
oh, I had one more for you before we get to the questions. So you talked about the disruption, Stan Tatkin's work, and the disruption to attachment. And even when a parent comes in the room, they don't regulate. Is that because that child does not perceive that the parent is a safe, caregiver, or is there something else going on?
Yeah, that can be part of it, like that strange situation. Kids who are securely or more securely attached, you'll see when the parent comes back in, there will be some recognition and maybe running to mom and dad and maybe some clinginess. for a while. The kid who is disorganized, or later on dismissive in their attachment, you'll see him actually
Oh,
resist
interesting.
the parents' attempts to reunite. And so it's interesting. You would think from that experiment, you'd think watching the child as the parent leaves the room, the kid's not feeling anything. The kid's definitely feeling something and feeling the abandonment, but they mask it, and
Interesting.
they resist the reunification, because of the sting of the abandonment. Um, so it's interesting. Again, it's really complex. To look at it on the surface, you might think the kid who, wants the independence and is not upset by mom or dad coming back is the more securely attached autonomous person. But secure attachment and autonomy does not mean I don't need anybody. It's a recognition of clear abilities and boundaries. There's only so much I can do for myself, and there's something I need from you. So, again, with my 2-year-old right now, it's this frustrating mix of like, no, I'll do it myself. And then, like, I was doing dishes this morning, and my 2-year-old wants me to hold him, like both arms. And I just made the suggestion, oh, you should go play toys. And he like skips out of the room, after, it was like the biggest crisis of his life that I wouldn't pick him up right then. So it's complex. Security, I think, and maturity is earned through struggle. It's earned through trial and error. It's not this, I automatically have a sense of what to do. It's actually, and this is where I think the early parental relationship can mirror in some helpful ways our mature adult relationships. Security is built through collaboration. I'll help with what I can, and you will communicate to me the best of your ability what you might need, and we'll figure out what to do with the gaps together.
Yeah. Okay. So there's some questions in here. When will I know when my husband is ready to give an honest disclosure?
Mm. I mean, I'm looking at the word no,
Yeah, I
and
know that. I was thinking that too. I was like,
uh,
that
well,
sounds like an absolute.
here's a couple of things with disclosure. When it is a good idea to do it, and then I'll talk about the inherent risks of disclosure. When first of all, when your addicted spouse has a disclosure regimen, a disclosure program to adhere to, and they do it, they're doing their work on it, they're doing the excavating, they're working back and forth with their therapist and support people to craft the disclosure. So I think it's a good sign when you see your partner actively engaged in that process, earnestly engaged. When your therapist hears from their therapist, we want to know what questions you have. Send them over, and we'll get ready to answer those. Now, the risks. Disclosure is not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee of a lot of things. Disclosure is not a guarantee that your partner is going to tell the whole truth. Disclosure is not a guarantee that the truth sets us both free. We can get absolute honesty on the table, and we may learn things that are prohibitive of us being able to move forward together. So a lot of times, people will look at the outcome, whether I was disappointed or helped or soothed or not. They'll look at the outcome and they'll backtrack. They'll look backwards. Well, we must have not been ready because the outcome wasn't great. From the standpoint of what we're talking about today, I think disclosure is one of those challenging events that couples can give themselves that does push for greater maturity. So for an addicted person who has not seen or practiced the value of complete transparency and honesty in a relationship, they grow up a lot during good disclosure prep. For a partner who's been betrayed and hurt, they grow up a lot as they face the potential reality. I may learn things here that I can't come back from. I may hear things that I can't unhear. It may change my entire perception of this person and our relationship going forward. Um, so I think the value in a disclosure is less about this guarantee that it makes all right, and it's more of a really accelerated course in maturing the individuals and the relationship together. So we put honesty first and foremost. And then in the next phase, we put accountability and talking about our real true feelings first and foremost. And in the third phase, the restitution, we put empathy and understanding first and foremost. Um, so again, the big thing I would say to look here is he working on it? And is he working on it in a serious way? That's, I think, one of the best indicators that someone is becoming as ready as they can be for disclosure.
Yeah, and I really appreciate, you talked about the person having a qualified professional, partners having a qualified professional. Like this is, I'll say it all the time. This is not a do-it-yourself job. Like those are a disaster, and having clear expectations of what you are expecting out of it, and making sure that you're clear on what a disclosure can bring and what it can't do. It like you said, isn't going to magically fix everything, and now we're going to be good. Whew, got that done. So, it can set a foundation for moving forward. But like I was thinking, I would want to know: are you partner ready? Do you have the support in place? Like focusing on that. What do you need to do for self care? What is the plan? Is there a date scheduled? All of those things. And one more thing, like I cringe when I hear, we've had 9 disclosures, like, oh my gosh, like, this is like, get to, getting to a point where we know this, well, you don't know, but where we have some degree of comfort that we are moving forward, that there isn't going to be, well, 2 weeks from now, I'm going to get another one, and then I'm going to get another one, because there isn't any serious plan of, for recovery, like John was saying. So, okay, next question. Betrayed. I find it next to impossible to be in public with my essay, not just the situation, but the trashy way women dress everywhere. Um, and it is on purpose for attention. I find going out in public more disgusting and sad for society at all. How can anyone handle the women purposely dressing for attention that we have put up with just to go to a store?
There's a mantra here, and from AA originally, but I think it applies really generally. And I hope you don't take this as dismissive. It's not meant to be. But one thing we learn in recovery is to let go and let God. And it's really easy, especially when we're wounded and we're vulnerable, um, to have our hurt magnified by attaching meaning and motive to another's actions that make you feel unsafe, or that objectively make you unsafe. So this is a real struggle for a lot of people in your position, being betrayed. There are reminders and there are triggers everywhere. Um, Again, I go back to one of the pillars we're talking about today, which is that personal responsibility. What can I do about me in my own sphere? And a really dear friend of my wife and I, after her divorce, um, you know, she, she's really tried to belly up to the bar, go to therapy, get help. And one of her first big revelations, she said, whether this is true or not, I really have to start looking at the world as like, people are not doing this against me or at me. People don't have this opinion at me or this difference at me. And up to that point, she had a story, like a real verifiable story that supported that. But there was this choice that she had to make, this perspective shift that she had to embrace, or she couldn't function in the world. And again, it's part of, I think, the maturity level of dealing with injustice. Um, verifiably, I think it's fundamentally unjust that any of us have to live in a world that requires a lot of energy or a lot of struggle to feel at peace. But again, that's the world everybody lives in. And so I go back to that AA mantra: let go and let God. Part of the maturity is you divide out what's on your plate. What can I do anything about, and what can I? we practice a lot of surrender. We practice a lot of coming back to focusing on self. Um, we practice a lot of um, letting go of that which doesn't serve us, be that alarm bells in our mind or our body, be that perspectives that, while they may be true, um, don't give us much more than just heartache. So I would say that.
And yeah, you kind of mirrored the serenity prayer. I have control over my actions and my reactions, nothing else. How people act, dress, what they do, what they say, like I have zero control. And sometimes people say or do things that I don't personally like. And um, for me, when I'm in a judgmental mode, I am negative. I can be bitter. I am not in a positive and uplifting thing. And for me, I just can't, I can't stay stuck there. It is toxic for me. And so for me, yeah, a healthy boundary around that is looking at what do I have control of in this, and I also don't want to not interact with the entire world. Because I can be really safe if I just stay in my little bubble, but I'm a people person. I want to, and so finding places where I actually can connect with people that are very different from me, that look different and whatever, honestly is a joy for me. The more I can learn about other people, it's a good thing. I am sorry that the whole world feels, horrible to you. And I think how people dress, like there can be judgments about, like they may be fine. I know when my daughter, you're talking about kids, when my daughter was a kid, there was a certain way of dressing and doing, and like some of it I thought was all ridiculous and all of that kind of stuff, and you just kind of go, what it is. Now they look at pictures and kind of go, those hairstyles, especially the ones with whatever it is, you just kind of go, it is what it is. And and everybody makes their choices. So, I try to live in an esteemable way and do things from that standpoint. That's what I do have control over. Okay, next one. You've mentioned passion and purpose as being an integral part of healthy, intimate partnership. Can you explain more specifically what you mean by passion and purpose and how that might manifest in a committed relationship? Great question. Thanks for picking up on that little
Yeah.
phrase.
I think when it comes to intimate, committed relationships, I would actually flip the two words, and it's a purpose that ignites passion.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Passion is, and I say it this way because that's what's functional. There's nothing magical about it. So passion, I would say, is this like self-sustaining, self-reverberating energy that comes from this positive feedback loop in a relationship. So purpose, when I'm working with couples, I check for this early on. What agreements have you made? What do you stick to? What is this relationship about? Sometimes I'll even ask the question, if the entire world had a vote on whether your relationship should last or not, why should we care? What's so special
Mm,
about this? Um, so purpose is whatever two people make of it. It's the bigger idea of the relationship that we both really, really love. So some couples I work with, I see a lot of couples really get off the ground with the purpose of nobody I know wants to work on themselves or believes in working on themselves as much as you do. I don't have to fight you for time and focus on myself because you get it, and I don't have to nag you for time and focus on yourself because you get it. That's rare. Um, some relationship, their purpose is and another one I've seen get off the ground is we want to make sure that we are insanely happy and that we
mm,
provide that for and with each other. And so when couples land on the right purpose, something that ignites, that they believe in more than themselves, that's where you see passion come from in a committed relationship. Passion is the energy that we use to do the right thing when the right thing is the hardest thing. So, I may not feel like slowing down and listening right now to what a rough day you've had, or how unhappy you are with me right now. I may not feel like I got that energy, but when I remember we're in this to make sure that we are insanely happy, and you're not right now, and that matters. All of a sudden, I can find enough energy to go the distance with you and to do that authentically, not just in a placating way. Um, so a lot of couples feel like we have to clear away the garbage before we've got passion and purpose. I actually think that purpose can shift over time, but I've seen couples ignited in early recovery, like neither of us want to stay pinned under this garbage truck, and we're going to work hard on that together. We want to get on the other side of this so we can see what our relationship actually has to offer. I've seen couples get ignited by that. A lot of energy comes up in what they're willing to do for themselves and each other, that without that unified purpose, they wouldn't have had that willingness to do some hard lifting, some hard pushing.
I love that. That's I love the we want to be insanely happy. I may go get a sign printed for my house. Um, my essay husband is thoroughly enmeshed with his mother, and so is resistant to the concept that he's unwilling, and is so resistant to the concept that he's unwilling to learn about enmeshment and it impacts on intimacy avoidance and addiction. He has her on a pedestal, and there is so much denial that he can't even consider the idea that his relationship with his mother is problematic. His anger, guilt, and confusion are suppressed by his loyalty to her. How can a mother enmeshed man work through this if he won't even acknowledge the enmeshment? This is a great question, and I
Yeah.
know you see this all the time too, but I do too. So
Yeah, the short answer is he can't. None of us can work through a problem we can't acknowledge. I love this example from, I believe it was Marsha Linehan. She talked about, I think she talked about the purple room or some ugly color. Purple's not ugly, but for the purpose of this, she said if you moved into a new home and you had this room, this entire room painted this awful shade of purple, and you could never acknowledge the room is purple and I hate it, that room is not going to change. And so there is no change without acknowledgement. Here, I would point you to, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of leverage points in this situation, but there are a few. And unfortunately, they rely more on you than your enmeshed partner. So most everybody faces this throughout their life. We aren't willing to let go of something until we face the pain of holding on to it. We face the consequences of holding on to it. So in Dr. Adams' book, When He's Married to Mom, I believe it's chapter 8, is written to spouses of enmeshed men. And he outlines in there a really good framework for if he's not moving of his own volition, like how do I put this on his plate? But he says at the end of that chapter, if you are not willing to put the relationship on the line, and leverage that into him looking at this, it's not likely, like nothing can change there, and that's also not a guarantee. And he says unless you're willing to do that, it's best that you don't threaten or cajole. Like you really have to move yourself to a point where you're able to say, I've had enough. I want you to go work on this. You've got 6 months for me to be able to see some improvement before I can consider continuing this relationship with you. And that's a lot of heavy lifting for a partner, especially for something that you didn't ask for and didn't foster. But again, I go back to the premise of what we'll be talking about the next few weeks. That's one of the ways that personal responsibility manifests in a relationship. At the end of the day, we realize that two consenting adults can live their personal lives however they want to. They can. That doesn't mean they should. Um, but we can organize ourselves individually however we want to, and there are consequences in a relationship. And so I don't think it makes one partner the bad guy to say, hey, how you want to have this relationship with your family, I don't get it. I don't like it, but it doesn't work for me. So you can if you want, but you can't have us both. I'm sorry to put you in that position, but this is unbearable for me. And I either need to change or I need to move on. Um, there's the
yeah.
personal responsibility in the relationship.
And Dr. Rob talks about that in Out of the Doghouse too. It's similar. Like you can continue to do all that, and but you can't have and me. So,
Yeah.
um, okay. How is lack of accountability, lack of empathy, and denial different from those in emotional development arrest due to trauma versus these behaviors in addicts?
It's not. It's not, because those are things that, to a person, when you look at people who handle relationships well and are secure functioning, they see the benefits of accountability, empathy, and not becoming defensive or in denial, the benefits of living in reality. So again, those are complex things that I have not yet seen a person who resists that in adult relationships. I've not yet seen a person do that and they have not had some kind of wound in the past that has them resisting that complexity. So in my work with addicted folks, and I know some people's theories on this differ, but I don't treat that as a special thing that addicts do. I treat it the same way I would with someone with trauma. As you challenge, you have to challenge that way of being. You have to get them to actually think about, not just how rewarding it is up front to not be transparent, but also how damaging it is down the road. And you do that through, all sorts of different thought experiments, confronting denial, like all that kind of stuff. But for the purposes of my work, it's not any different as a developmental issue versus a behavior in an addict. Addicts are developmentally delayed. That's why they have a primary relationship with a substance or behavior, not a person.
Yeah, when you were like very young ages, I was like, yep, no, lots of people got stuck there. Okay,
Yeah.
this is a good one for your dad hat. On the topic of planning time for kids to strap in, my youngest child is 3.5 years old and has time to buckle himself in until I have everything loaded. But if he has not buckled himself by then, he usually has at least 2 minutes by that point. Then I buckle him in. Is that a reasonable boundary?
Um, yes, asterisk.
Mhm.
Some of that would depend on the temperament of the kid. And it's not that the kid should rule it, but the thing I love about this is there's negotiation opened up. Okay, you've got until I get the car loaded. And once the car's loaded, it's time to go. So we don't just foster healthy kids by letting them do whatever they want and struggle. We also keep like natural consequences on the table. So it's great you're learning how to do this, but if you're holding everybody up for 15 minutes, that's not very fair. So the thing I like about this is there's a negotiation there. You know what time and space you have, and then there will be a time where we come back together and we decide if we're going to do something different or not.
Okay, next question. Do I, as a betrayed partner, have an intimacy disorder if I am okay living with an active sex addict or an addict who is just sober with poor recovery? Do I myself have an intimacy disorder?
Here's what I look at there. I'm okay. So there are a million different relationship configurations under the sun. The things I like to check for with folks, and I have to remember this as a marriage therapist all the time. I'm helping people get a relationship they want to be a part of, not that I want to be a part of. Um, there's a couple things I would look at. Am I okay because the other options feel like they've got too much fear in it for me or too much uncertainty? That to me is a decision that more comes out of fear than, no, I really think this is best for me. I'm really fine with this. I would also look at, well, not also, I would just say, if you've examined the motives behind why I feel okay and why I stay and why this is working for me, and again, you are okay with those, and there is not a bending of reality in that, God be with you. Like I said, people, there's all sorts of different relationship configurations that work for people. And just because you have some voices chiming in saying, gosh, that's unhealthy, that's disordered intimacy, it might not be, and it's not for anybody else to say.
I love that answer. Okay, last question. We're going to get it done in time before we get cut off. Husband keeps prioritizing his adult son and son's girlfriend doing activities while excluding me, the stepmom. We are therapeutically separated out of the house. Couples counselor, who's a CSAT, has told husband he is at risk of losing the relationship because he continues to do this after betrayal. We did a formal therapeutic disclosure D-Day 3 years ago. I'm stepping back and no longer engaging with my husband as I have told them how hurtful this is. Can SA be enmeshed with their adult sons? This is very painful after almost 20 years together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And especially in these like blended family situations, blended families are notoriously difficult because there's a lot of complexity there. I have seen them work really well, but it takes two very mature people at the head to be able to do that. It's complex when, to an adult son to say, this woman, my new wife, has not been in your life, but she is my top priority now. That's complex. That's a lot to handle. And when you have people who don't want to handle grief or discomfort in order to have bonded primary relationships, yeah, it gets really messy and it can't work for everybody.
Okay, I lied. There is one more question. And if we get cut off, I'm sorry. My spouse has masturbated and used porn in our relationship. And even though it hurts me and causes impacts on our relationship, he argues with me and our couples therapist about whether he has an addiction. He had an appointment with a CSAT and she did an 80-question test. We do not have the results, but is it possible for the test to be inaccurate or if he is in denial?
Yeah, unfortunately, all the assessments we use as CSATs, they're self-report. So they're only as reliable as the person answering the question. I would say addiction is not the issue here to decide whether or not this is going to work for a relationship. If you as the partner are saying, I don't like this, doesn't work for me, your partner has a choice to make. I mean, the issue could be he likes to sit down and sing Kumbaya with the cats every night, and I think that's weird, or I don't want him to do that. So remember, in functional relationships and secure functioning relationships, we understand and we accept we both have conditions under which this can and cannot work. And it is not my job as partner A to set the conditions for partner B and for them to be okay with that. I can be whoever I'm going to be, but I'm not entitled to my partner loving that unless they really love it or it's a good deal for them. So, yeah, take those results lightly, not because I can tell he's an addict or not, but also because I think the main point is you're saying, I don't like this, I don't want to do this. So it doesn't matter why he does it, he's got to reckon with that.
We're out of time. We're going to get cut off. Bye. Thank you.
Yeah,
Great topic.
thank you.